Hey art nerds, so we've got a bit of potential art supply redemption. Do you guys remember when I reviewed this 36 half pan set from Grabie? If you don't remember, I'll link it in the description for you guys. And it was an all metallic set. Well, before I even talked to them about this, I had purchased a 48 piece set off of AliExpress. I'm pretty sure these are manufactured by the same people. I don't know who the actual manufacturer is. I don't think it's Grabie or Grabie, but I'm going to refer to it as such because that's the best I've got right now. So today we are going to unbox and swatch this 48 half pan set from the same manufacturer. I think I'm finally wrapping up my student grade Showdown. I've definitely got a few stragglers, mostly in the Mia camp, but today we're taking a look at something we may have seen before. If this looks familiar to you, it's because I reviewed a similar set from Grabie a while back. This was a set they had sent to me to review, and it is a metallic set, and to be really honest, I wasn't that impressed, but I am also not really a metallic watercolor person. I don't do like brush lettering, I don't do card making, and while I do use metallics from time to time, a set like this is just not going to deliver enough color. It's better than some of the sets I reviewed, that is for sure, but if I'm getting a metallic watercolor set, I'm probably going to stick with the fine text sets. So this set underneath is one that I had purchased actually before the Grabie set from AliExpress. I assume it's the same manufacturer. They basically look identical. This is a 48 color set. You can see it is super duper well wrapped. It comes in a metal tin. These would actually be perfect to gut and use my preferred watercolors in because I'm actually running out of space in my Daily Driver watercolor palette and it's looking gross as all get out. So let's take a look at this palette. This watercolor palette has 36 regular colors and 12 metallics. You guys just heard me talk about my feelings on the Grabie 36 metallic set. I do not expect these to be that different. It also comes with an eraser, a pencil, a brush, a water brush, and a small scrubbing sponge. Honestly, all this is looking super familiar. I am pretty sure in the no, I didn't talk about these. Well, I talked about the water brush, so I probably talked about this. Didn't talk about the pencil. Maybe talked about the eraser. Oh, it is a very dusty eraser. Some things never change. So what I think I'm going to do is, since these are so similar and I feel like I've probably already covered a lot of this ground, I'm going to mostly focus on the watercolors today. As is fairly common with buying things on AliExpress, I can't find a listing for this exact palette. I found one from the same manufacturer for the 12 color pearlescent and the 36 color pearlescent, and the images on their listing show this set, but they don't have this set, but I know they made this set. So I can only really give you guys the price for the 36 because that's the closest to this that I have, and that would be $17.88. And I feel like I probably paid around $24 for this. Another problem with AliExpress is finding things, just the way they name things. Okay, I'll give you an example. 1236 colors, watercolor pigment, tin box set, pearlescent color, nail art rendering, solid watercolor, DIY painting beginners. If I wanted to search that in my history, my Gmail history, I feel like I would go nuts. Some of these things are named so strangely. So I also kind of like went through the listing, and it's just really pretty product photos with the Paul Rubens brush, and there's basically no information at all. They keep promising high quality watercolor pigment over and over on every picture, but no information. And another bonus is this listing has no feedback. Mwah! I've bought some good things from AliExpress. I actually really like buying art supplies on AliExpress. Some of my favorite watercolors that I've reviewed in this student grade showdown came from AliExpress or from vendors who usually sell on AliExpress. But man, it is a crapshoot what you're gonna get. And I've definitely discovered that during the student grade showdown. Am I going to keep buying stuff from AliExpress? Yes. But is it still going to be a crapshoot? Yes. And part of me kind of likes it. I know. It's that novelty and the ADHD brain that, would I recommend it to other people like that? No. But that's why I review these things, so you guys don't have to. I have the experience and I've already spent the money, so you might as well take advantage of my good luck and my bad luck. But couldn't really find a lot of information about this set, and I couldn't even find this particular set's listing. So I will link the closest I could find for you guys down in the description below. If you can find the listing for it and you want to comment in the comments, that would also be very welcome. So, let's take a look at these paints first, and then we'll get to swatching. So, the metallic paints all seem to be poured. In other videos, I've talked about one of the reasons companies seem to like doing metallic paints is honestly, they're pretty cheap to do. Mica is pretty cheap. So, the non-metallic paints, and I'm sorry that my hand looks gross. I picked that's one of my stems is I pick my hands, so I apologize. I picked a little too hard this time. These are really dry extruded little chiclets. Once upon a time, I pointed out that I don't necessarily care for the chiclets when it comes to the student grade showdown, that I've had bad experiences, and someone pointed out that they have better experiences with the chiclets than they do with the poured because the poured watercolors mold for them. I looked into that, and see, I've never had a problem with that, and I live in a high humidity environment. I live in Louisiana, but we keep the humidity in our house fairly low, and I have several little hydrometers. In fact, I have one right here for myself, and because I have a pet who requires a certain range for humidity, so I'm pretty on top of it. So if you put your watercolors away wet, i.e. shut the case and put it away, they can mold. You can supposedly use Detrol to clean off your palette, and I guess clean off your paints if they've started to mold, but Winsor & Newton recommends that for the most part you just scrap it, start fresh, clean everything really good, because it's a mold is a fungus, right? Or they're similar, and once you start having problems with that sort of thing, it's hard to stop. As someone who lives in Louisiana, where during Hurricane Katrina people's homes would get infested with black mold, and at that time there was no treatment for that. You had to like tear it down and start anew, and now they do have treatments for it. I think if I started to have problems with mold, and I haven't yet, thankfully, I would go for like Detrol or some other, like I have Hibby Cleanse, and that's another like medical grade soap that's useful for cleaning like wounds and abrasions. So that, or maybe Dawn, like something that would kill it. But I always let my paints dry open palette before I put them away. So that would be my suggestion, but I'm sorry you're having those problems. You can also buy silica packets and maybe try keeping some silica packets in your palette or in the box or container that you keep your palette in, and that might help with the humidity control. But wanted to touch on that because I did do the research, I did look into it, and I wanted to share it with you guys in case it might be helpful. But You could Google that. That's a really easy Google search. And Winsor Newton has a little bit more information about it, but not a whole lot more because I don't know. I guess there aren't scientists out there studying why watercolors grow mold. I mean, maybe they should. So let's go ahead now and start swatching these watercolors. So as always, Pinky, we are going to be swatching on the Blick Premier 100% cotton cold press watercolor paper because even though this is the student grade Showdown, I want to give these paints the best chance possible for success. And I think cotton rag paper is going to allow me to do that. I'm also going to be using my brushes, not their brushes, because don't really have a lot of faith in what they've included. And like I said, we want to give it the best chance possible. So we have 36 regular colors and we have 12 metallic colors. So one of the areas I'm going to be looking at is opacity. And to test that, I am going to use a Copic marker to put some lines down on our cotton rag paper. So if you are new here, hi, hello, welcome. I'm Becca Hilburn. I'm a watercolor comic artist and illustrator. I paint the comic 7-inch Cara. It is a watercolor comic and you can read it at 7inchcara.com. I'd really appreciate it if you take a look at it. I also review art supplies, have been doing so for over 10 years now, and I moonlight as an art educator. And generally with my reviews, I've already spent the money, so I'm trying to save you guys some money. Also, as an ADHD person, art supplies are one of my hyper focuses. I'm hyper fixated on art supplies. So I figured I might as well share my obsession with you. So hopefully I can answer some of your questions in my reviews. I also share tutorials, comic drawing, and watercolor, as well as alcohol marker tutorials. So if that sounds good to you, if you want to join me on this journey, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and click that bell notification to let YouTube know that you want to see more from me. In today's review, not only are we going to be swatching these watercolors, but we're also going to do some color mixing as well as a wet into wet test to determine how good or bad these watercolors are. I am also going to compare them to some other student grade watercolors. My big goal for this series is to do a big ranked tier list as a live stream with you guys, talking about the pros and cons of different student grade watercolors, hopefully to help you guys find the right match of affordable and actually performs like watercolors and not like wet chalk. So if you like what I do and you want to help me on this journey, you can join me at patreon.com/nattosoup because the funds from my Patreon are used to purchase products like this one here so that I can give you guys as unbiased a review as I possibly can. Because when I spend the money, when these things are terrible, it legitimately hurts. And I legitimately cannot hide that. So that's why some of my reviews are a little bit saltier than others, is because I spent that money. It was not sent to me. And now I'm out that money. So without further ado, let's go grab some brushes. Let us pre-activate these and let's get started with our swatching. I've already noticed that after spritzing these, some of the colors are starting to change a little bit. They're starting to lighten up. So before we get into swatching, I do want to talk about mass tone and optical brighteners. Mass tone is the color that you see when the watercolor is in mass, like a pile of paint or in a half pan. Usually professional grade watercolors seem a little bit darker and a little bit duller, at least in mass tone, than student grade watercolors. And the reason for that is professional grade watercolors are not using as many extenders, fillers, and optical brighteners. Optical brighteners are added to a watercolor, one, to make it cheaper because it's an extender and it's usually something like titanium white or chalk, and two, to make it more appealing in the half pan, to make it look more bright and vibrant and sell the watercolors. Optical brighteners in and of themselves are not necessarily a bad thing. If you like pastel watercolors, they probably contain titanium white to achieve that color. However, when so much optical brightener has been added to the watercolor that it changes how it handles, it changes its mixability, it changes its layerability, it changes its liftability, that starts to become a problem for me. So we're going to be looking at opacity. We want to see a variety of opacity because different pigments would have different opacity properties. We want to see granulation, but varying levels for same reason as opacity. Different pigments would be ground to different sizes in order to best reflect that color. A little bit of physics that I can't explain to you guys, but I'm sure one of you in the comments will be very generous because it's actually really cool. We are also looking at how they wash out with water. Something I've noticed is that cheaper dye-based watercolors tend to flood the water, so you don't really get like a subtle gradation in color. It's like bam, all the color right there. So we're going to be looking for that. And then after our watercolors dry, we're going to be looking at liftability. We're also going to be looking at activatability, i.e. how much color these watercolors actually deliver when we scrub it up using our brush and apply it to the paper. So honestly, these watercolors are kind of gross. I started out with the neutrals because they were the first in the set, saving the metallics for later, and like, these are just nasty. The way they granulate out, it's like they used a dye-based watercolor and then added a something to make it look like granulation, maybe charcoal, or maybe they just like sediment weird. I can't imagine painting something with this. It would ruin the faces. So I changed the angle so you guys could see it better, but I wanted to start off by showing y'all the swatches and the palette. Also, look at all these weird floaters. Those are from those watercolor paints. What is that? I have seen some YouTube shorts talking these up, and that's not why I bought them, but like it definitely makes me feel like I must exist in some alternate universe because these are not good, and these shorts are swearing up and down these are great. So maybe I'm in the Twilight Zone here. These are really, really bad. They glop up on the brush even after you've allowed them to dry for a while. The granulation, if you can even call it that, is almost entirely this weird black schmutz that kind of wrecks the color, and I'm betting these are dye-based. There's no graduation in the color when you add water. The color just floods the swatch. Now I realized after doing my swatches that I didn't do any mass tone swatches. So after everything dried, and I'm showing you guys the drawing so you can see how weird these things are, I went back and added mass tone swatches. Also, the rinse water for these is just so nasty. I switch it out every time I hit a new row of watercolors, and it's always uniquely disgusting. The metallics in this palette are basically the same as the last time when we reviewed the Grabie 36 palette. They're really underwhelming for metallics, and these kind of dye and mica-based metallics are very common, super easy to find, and tend to be pretty cheap. There are better options out there. I don't know if you guys have heard, but these are not good. They're not good. They're so bad. It really makes me kind of wonder if I even want to attempt the color mixing or the wet into wet. I'm going to do the color mixing we will see. If I have space to cram in like a mini wet into wet, I will, but like these are gross, and I don't know if I want to waste a whole sheet of watercolor paper on something that's gonna look like that. And like we can kind of see where that's coming anyway. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the lifting test. Almost said wet, lift into wet test, but it's like that doesn't make any sense. And that's a really easy one. We're looking for varying degrees of liftability. So basically I use my brush and I just kind of scrub at it. Use a piece of paper towel, see how much it lifts. Some colors should be more lifting than others. We really don't want to see uniform lifting. Now, who is surprised when the lift test comes around that these all basically lift about the same? Honestly, I feel like this has taken me so long, and realistically, I know I'm trying to keep this one shorter. And what makes it feel like it's taken so long is these watercolors are just so weird. If any of you guys know what the schmutziness is, please let me know. I am very curious about it. They do lift about the same. There's a few outliers that are a little more staining. There's a few outliners that are a little more lifting. But all in all, they lift about the same, which is pretty indicative generally of lots of optical brighteners. So make of that what you will. I'm going to move on now to color mixing so we can get an idea of how these really handle. So if you're not familiar with my unbox and swatch reviews, I do two types of color mixing. I do optical, and I create a color grid for that, and I do atomic, where I mix two primary colors together to create a secondary color. For our color mixing test, I'm going to start by laying down some lines for our optical blending test, and that'll give them a chance to dry. It's pretty easy to find our primary colors here, and then while that's drying, we'll do our atomic mixing. And these are so muddy, and they muddy the water so fast, and they look so muddy on the page, not even when they're mixed. Honestly, it's kind of hard to find what colors you're looking for because the mass tones are so similar, but then the swatches are fairly different, especially when it comes to the yellows. So I was doing kind of my best guesses, and these mix so nasty. All of the colors look like the Van Gogh dust colors, which have their place, but not when you're trying to mix vibrant colors. Pretty much all of these mixes look like mud, even the mixes that are usually really vibrant. Do I even want to do a wet into wet test with this? Is it even worth the price of a piece of cotton rag paper? I'm not going to do a full wet into wet test for this one. I'm going to do a mini one down here because I know how this is gonna go. But I want to acknowledge the fact that if you watch most of my videos, it's probably pretty tedious to watch a bunch of just negative reviews in a row. I'm really sorry about that. When I decided to do the student grade showdown, I didn't expect it to really shake out this way. I didn't think there would be so many bad watercolors. And I figured there were going to be a lot of like middling watercolors, a lot of like, okay, I can see where they cut costs. And I really thought the focus was going to be on like figuring out like the peccadillos and like who the target demographic was and being able to offer educated recommendations. I didn't realize how many cheap cash grabs there were out there, and I'm sorry. And this one feels like it might be a cheap cash grab. Cheap, but I had space, so I'm doing a mini wet into wet test just to demonstrate. So I'm gonna dab in just a bunch of different colors. I'm not trying to pick the worst ones. I'm usually trying to pick from a rainbow of colors so we can see how different colors handle and blend into each other, and which colors granulate and which colors turn into nothing when they dry. I'm really not trying to like set these watercolors up for failure. That said, these are weird. They all just crack when they hit water, and they took forever to dry. There's like some weird extender in there. They might have an unusual type of binder. Just look at that. What is all like granulation about? These are not marketed as like super granulating watercolors. I review plenty of those, and these aren't really handling like that. I'd used the lid for my color mixing, so I'm just gonna quickly wipe it off. It hasn't been sealed or anything, it's just straight up metal, so you're gonna wanna make sure you don't leave any water on it. These are really weird and really kind of awful. The wet into wet test looks like I was playing around with my super granulating watercolors. All of these colors split in really kind of unattractive, difficult to predict ways. I didn't really see that coming, and they look bad. They just look bad. Usually with the wet into wet tests, even the cheaper dye-based watercolors make for a kind of pretty psychedelic wet into wet experience, you know, like. But this looks bad. Looks like a hellscape, kind of. I'm glad I didn't dedicate a whole sheet of paper to that, because that would be a waste of a sheet of paper. When I say these are bad, I mean these are comparable to some of the worst watercolors I've reviewed during this showdown. They're at least uniquely bad, though. They aren't just dye-based. They aren't just full of optical brighteners. They don't just granulate muddily and strangely. And that makes them at least kind of amusing. At least it's something new under the sun. So they kind of remind me of the Seamiart watercolors. This is one of the smaller sets that I took a look at. This is what I mean by very much dye-based, when none of your earth tones granulate and your Van Dyke brown is this weird like pumpkin kind of color, and this redwood is, I don't know, like these were a mess. These were a mess, but at least they came in a reusable palette, right guys? They also kind of remind me of the DDD Praise, particularly the, do I not have the ones they actually remind me of? I mean, I have them. I just might not have grabbed them. They remind me of the Ocean colors, which are these weird, like graphite-esque watercolors. But just take a look. These are the DDD Praise metallics. They look so much like these here. Really would not surprise me if these were made by the same company. At the very least, they're buying the same mica pigments for these. I have reviewed so many student grade watercolors that are way better than this awful set. It would take me 30 to 40 minutes just to talk about all of them. And don't forget, I do plan on doing a tiered ranking list live stream, so y'all can just wait for that, right? But I did want to talk about some alternatives that are going to be a better investment for your money and that I genuinely like. So this isn't the all-inclusive list, it's the short list. These are also more price comparable than some of the other ones that I could recommend. So we will start with the Phoenix watercolors. I'm pretty sure Cotman is white labeling from Phoenix. So if you like Cotman in terms of student grade quality, you can just get them from Phoenix. They'll be less expensive and they come in a really pretty metallic tin. I have reviews for all of these, by the way. I will link them down in the description below for you guys. Next, we have the Superior folding screen style palette. Now, I've reviewed a lot of Superior, and I like Superior in general. This is my favorite of their palettes, partially because the form factor is so weird. It also reminds me of a Gensai style palette, and I happen to really like the color selection in this set. Something else I really like, and it does have its flaws, but you can actually remove these little chiclets of paint and reorder them so you can kind of customize your palette, which isn't always true with Superior's more adventurous palettes. And then finally, I mentioned this palette in basically every stream. The $45 price tag you see here is, I bought this at my local brick and mortar. I've seen it as low as $16 on Amazon before, so, you know, shop where it is most affordable or vote with your dollars and support a small business. It's up to you, but you can get this for much cheaper than $45. This is the Meiliang Pigments, or the Pretty Excellent, or the Parrot watercolor palette. And this is actually one of the student grade lines from Paul Rubens. So if you see the Owen or the Aowen palettes, basically same as this, also good quality, would also be a good buy. I didn't grab those because really they're kind of interchangeable. This is the 36 color palette, so 36 minus the metallics. They do have a 48. I think the 48 does have the metallics. Haven't tried their metallics, so I can't vouch for them, but I really like this palette. It is a fun, inexpensive little student grade palette that handles a lot like a professional grade watercolor experience. The paints are easy to layer, they granulate, they blend out cleanly, they don't have too many optical brighteners. Really, the biggest downside is this really cheap liner. But other than that, I'm really pretty satisfied with this little palette, and I think you guys will be too, at least more than you will for this palette here. What are the pros and cons of this kind of unnamed, let's call it Grabie, this watercolor palette? We'll start on a positive note and we'll talk about the pros. I can gut this case and use it for my daily driver watercolor palette, which is full of the watercolors I like to paint with. I've been wanting to upgrade the size of palette for a while. This could be a good option in terms of gutting it and just using the tin case for it. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that even though the colors are very cute, it might mislead people who are watching into thinking I'm actually using these paints. And I wouldn't want to do that because I really don't like these paints. The watercolors themselves come in half pans, so you could probably pry them out and refill them with your paint of choice. That said, you can buy empty half and whole pans and do just that without taking the time or spending the money to pry the paints out of the half pans to be able to reuse them. What about the cons? These are really gritty, kinda nasty colors. They're really gross. Also, the colors get used up pretty quickly, so there's a bit of false economy there if you think you're saving some money. It's also challenging to tell the colors apart, and they don't include a color map. They mix really strangely. I haven't seen too many mixes like these here, where you can see all that grit and all that granulation. So they mix really strangely. They're very muddy and strangely granulating. Like these were like a cool yellow with a cool blue. That should be a really vibrant green. That's usually a gimme. The greens and the oranges are usually the easy one. It's the purples. And then sometimes if I decide to do Payne's Gray, those are the more challenging ones. I didn't even try for Payne's Gray because I just didn't have high hopes for Payne's Gray, let's be real. The wet to wet test flat out looks gross. And it also is taking forever to dry. I don't know if there's like some strange kind of binder that I'm not used to that they're using, maybe like dextrin, or maybe they're using glycerin. I'm not sure. No one is disclosing anything. I don't think these can handle wet and wet or mixing or really layering applications very well. So that said, I have no idea who this palette would be for because, I mean, the colors aren't clean and bright enough to be good for brush lettering. They're not clean or bright enough to be used for card making. They're not clean enough to be used for watercolor illustration. They're just kind of gross. And something that a lot of these companies try to do is they claim that these are for beginners. And I really want to kind of, explain why I don't think that is the case. I think the 3 palettes I showed you guys, the Phoenix, the Superior, and the Meiliang, those are for beginners. They have more binder, more optical brighteners to kind of extend it a little bit. They're not using as many pigments. They may be using some cheaper pigment substitutions, but all in all, they handle like watercolors should, and they're a decent palette. They're not bad, they're just not the best. These are cheap, but they don't even handle like watercolors. You can't even use them like watercolors. They don't do what watercolors are supposed to do. So even for beginners, you would be better off buying like a Prang set of watercolors or the Yarka children's line. I've talked about both here on the channel. Those are going to handle more like watercolors than these are going to handle like watercolors. So I've mentioned this in some of the other student grade showdowns. I don't understand why companies are making these. They're bad. They're a waste of money. They're a waste of Earth's limited natural resources. They're a waste of oil. I don't really get why they're making them. That said, if you have this set and you like this set and you're using this set, I am not at all judging you, your artistic ability, your artistic potential, your choices. This isn't about you. It is not a criticism about you. There are great artists who can make beautiful art with Crayola watercolors. I cannot. This is just my review coming from my standpoint as a watercolor artist, hoping to save people some money when possible and point them in the direction of art supplies they're gonna like if I can, because I genuinely think that if more people make art a part of their day-to-day lives, express themselves through art, and can find joy with making art themselves with their own hands or their mouth or their feet, whatever you need to use to make art, the process of making art is healing, and it gives back to you more than it really takes from you. And if I can encourage people to enjoy that process, and hopefully good art supplies promote that enjoyment, and unfortunately bad art supplies really make it more challenging to enjoy the process of making art. But if I can encourage more people to make art a part of their lives, then I sincerely believe they'll appreciate the art of others more as well. That certainly was true for me and basically almost every artist I know who hasn't shut their heart off and who has their ego hasn't subsumed their ability. Art appreciation makes life more wonderful. It adds this beautiful layer to your day-to-day life, and it can make life a little bit more worth living. And as an artist who earns her money making art tutorials and selling art and selling comics, I definitely want more people to be able to appreciate art and see how art can enrich their lives, not just as a member of the human race, but as a small business with books to sell. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this, and I hope you guys were able to find it helpful. So what's my verdict on this 48-piece color suit watercolor palette that claims to be saturated and bright, sun exposure, transparent and pure, smooth and smooth? Well, it is not really saturated and bright. A lot of these colors lack any potency whatsoever. As for sun exposure, I think these are dye-based, so they will fade in the sun very quickly. Transparent and pure, well, they are mostly transparent. The pure part, though, that's a bit of a joke. And smooth, no, that looks kind of like a scab. I don't think they've lived up to their own claims, let alone my expectation for these watercolors as an artist. So, my verdict is, don't buy these. So did we find art supply redemption today? No, absolutely not. And as we're reaching the ending the near of the student grade showdown, and I have reviewed so many student grade palettes that I have lost count. It has been over a year in the making, and I have a playlist for you guys if you're curious about some of the other student grade watercolors I've talked about, but I've literally lost count. I'm really not surprised that we're not going to see a lot of really impressive dark horse student grade watercolors at this point in time, because we're almost at the end. I basically cherry picked all the really fun ones and did those kind of in the middle after I got burnt out from a bunch of bad ones. I do have a few stragglers here and there. I have something a little higher end from Seamiart. I have something interesting from Phoenix Watercolors, and I've got some stuff from Martini Art, and I'm not really sure how to classify those. That's one of the sort of things that, like, I'm probably only going to decide whether it's student grade or not when I actually get to swatching it. But we are almost done with this series. I have reviewed stuff from AliExpress. I have reviewed a lot of stuff from Amazon, and surprise, a lot of the stuff on AliExpress ends up on Amazon, so it's worth a watch if you're shopping on Amazon anyway, because you're probably going to see it around. I have reviewed stuff from Target and Walmart, and Tuesday morning I have reviewed a few influencer watercolor palettes, although there are a few more. I have reviewed things from brands you guys know and love. I have reviewed things from brands that at the time I reviewed it, hardly anybody had heard of it. And I am really glad the showdown is wrapping up, because while I enjoyed it, it has run its course, and I really feel like I just don't have anything super new to say that I haven't already said, minus the tiered ranking list of what's worth your money and what isn't. And I want to do that as a live stream with you guys in the future, so I hope you guys are looking forward to that. I do have some professional grade paints that I want to unbox and swatch and talk about with you guys, but mostly I'm really just looking forward to getting back to doing watercolor tutorials, talking about studio supplies, that sort of thing, and not necessarily doing this huge showdown. Different artists here on YouTube handle these sort of things differently. Some people will go and they'll buy all the stuff, review it all, and then do one single video out of it. I don't know how they can afford to do that, because it is really expensive, as you guys probably know. Buying each of these things individually, paying full price in most instances. I do try to do a sale price when I can. That's not always an option, and trying to be a savvy shopper, but it still gets expensive and it's still really time consuming. So while I think those like all-in-one videos have their place, and I'll be releasing one of my own, I wanted to share the process and the journey with you guys as well, especially if you're looking for more information on any one of these individual palettes, or if you would like to see how they actually handle. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I honestly did not super enjoy unboxing and swatching this palette. The paints were really lackluster in this one. I'm not surprised, but if I can help you guys save money by spending my money, I'm happy to do so, and I'm happy to help. If you guys enjoy what I do, make sure that you click the subscribe button and hit the bell notification to let YouTube know that you want to see more from me. And if you'd like to support what I'm doing and get early access to videos, as well as backer exclusive goodies like class content and printable line art, you can join me at Patreon. Not sure this is going to be mirrored, not sure which way it's going to roll, so I'll just do this. Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I look forward to seeing you guys again soon, and I really look forward to wrapping up the student grade showdown with you guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye!